lost upon me personally today, and it is an honor to represent the Southeastern Conference, our presidents and chancellors, our 14 universities that are now 16 universities, and celebrating this day and knowing that we are entering a new era with enormous complexity and enormous opportunity to shape the future from the leadership position of the Southeastern Conference. So I look forward to interacting with you a bit, and for the rest of our day to be with both Joe C. and Joe H. and the members of the university, faculty, staff, athletic department, fans, students, coaches, to celebrate this move to the Southeastern Conference.
Well, welcome. And good to see a lot of you. Don't get to see as many of you as often at this time of year, but we knew we'd have something to bring you out. And so glad that you're here. Before I make my comments, I want to thank other members of the Southeastern Conference office, the leadership that supports our commissioner, many great people we've gotten to know in the meetings we've attended in the last several years, and people that are at the forefront of making great decisions around strategies for athletics, and certainly how it helps the SEC be strong. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. Some of you know them pretty well, and I get to see them a lot more. So we're here. There's no more, hey, Joe, what do you think of, are you excited about, hey, when you get there, you're going to, and fill in the blank. Because many of you all have been asking me that for pretty much the last year, certainly more intentionally, but ever since we made the announcement, always talking about what's next, and we didn't have a lot of information, or at least we had information we couldn't give you at the time. But now as we've gotten and progressed closer to this day, you started to see schedules, you started to see dates with opponents, starting to realize signage. Last week we have a big recruiting event, and the SEC logo gets painted on the field, and people are now understanding this is real, and it is really exciting for all of us. So you're not going to have to worry about us being passionate about our beliefs and our goals and our dreams going forward. It's didn't happen though quickly, even though sometimes it looks that way. It came after a lot of thought, deep thought about us as a university, where we are, in the world, what we're trying to accomplish broadly as a university, and what role intercollegiate athletics plays in that, and trying to keep an eye on how college athletics was evolving much more quickly than some people 10 years ago wanted to admit. And 10 years, when you're looking that far in the future, seems like it's way far away. But if you start breaking it down into certain increments, you realize, boy, things are going to start changing much more quickly here. What does that mean for Oklahoma? And what puts our program in the best position to be successful? And so I really reflect back onto the words that our president just provided. And I want to express a great deal of appreciation to him, his exemplary and strong leadership, to our board, both current and some of the former members that were on the board at the time this was being discussed and the decision was ultimately made. It was bold. It was forward thinking. It wasn't reactionary. And what we were going to do was also going to relate to what we were doing right at the time. And we wanted to do something probably few have done in this last 15 or 20 years around conference realignment. We wanted to do it in the best way possible that was orderly and honored all of our commitments and tried to respect our the members of the conference we were in. And in spite of the way the news came out in that July of 2021, we've done every single thing we said we would. And most importantly, what led us to this day. And so we think about what the move to the SEC means and how the strength of our university, our brand, if you will, to marry with the SEC and their strength and brand. And you step back and you reflect, say, you know, there are so many like-minded institutions that are coming together that, you know, what we bring to help the SEC be stronger, what their strength brings to help us be stronger in the long run. This is a natural fit. And I want to thank the commissioner and president and all the other leadership in the conference for helping this be as seamless as it could be under the circumstances. And so when we know where we're going forward, I told our staff and I told some of the fans that we met with last night and this morning, you know, we're really going together with a lot of confidence. Why? Because we are together. And it's only going to work if we bring everybody's best strengths forward. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're just excited to, you know, move on. Today's a celebration. It's about engaging our fans and our stakeholders. That's what this is. Rather than having a quick press conference and an announcement and moving on, you know, we've tried to really bring our fan base into it because we were very, very strident about not trying to celebrate it before the official day would come. But more importantly for us, it's what we're doing to put our program in a position to be successful going forward in the days and the weeks and the months and the years ahead, so we can be very successful. And, you know, the first dream we'd have would be being on a podium someday soon with Commissioner Sankey handing one of our teams, if not many of our teams at some point, the Southeastern Conference championship trophy. That's our first goal for every one of our sports in which compete in the SEC. So thank you, Commissioner, for helping us. President Harroz, thank you, and the board. And we're just so excited about going forward. For us, you know, the SEC stands for Southeastern Conference, and as President Harroz talked about the characteristics, it can also stand for stability, engagement, and champions. And that's pretty representative, too, of some of our own pursuits and core values. So with that, I turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you all. We'll go to questions now. If you do have a question, you haven't already let me know, raise your hand. I'll add you to the list. We'll get to you if we can. Let's start in the second row on the left. Barry Trammell, Tulsa World.
Greg, we've talked for 3 years about what the SEC can do for Oklahoma. What is Oklahoma going to do for the SEC?
Well, I noted the attention to detail there, so you got that one out of the way early. Obviously, a 12 state, so new geography. They have a clear expectation of excellence that I think complements our current members, the national championship achievements, in the notion that a rising tide lifts all ships, setting the expectations in our league that Pat Summitt established in women's basketball years ago, or Skip Bertman and his impact on baseball. You look at the achievements here, noting that those can be brought over. The fan base was an important part, and in our athletics director's conversation, one of our ADs observed, as we think about expansion, we should apply the "it just means more" filter. I don't mean to be trite, but there's no objective data. It's the subjective analysis of, does the integration of that athletics program, that university, that fan base fit seamlessly with our current 14 members? And I think clearly it does. And so all of those elements are brought. You look at facilities as you drive around and see the softball stadium that's been built. I think that sets a new standard in some ways. We have great facilities across our league. I've heard plans for other activities. I know that Joe has been looking at our league facilities and wondering and imagining, Joe Castiglione, and then he has to go for Joe Harroz for that conversation. So I'll just out that. I think one thing they do bring is we need to put last names on nameplates in our meetings now when our presidents and ADs meet. But they bring an elevation of expectation and a new set of challenges. They bring a new community, and the people here have the opportunity to visit new communities. I give the university and the folks in Norman from I won't use the name right, but Chamber of Commerce or Visitors Bureau who've been out scouting and thinking about how they communicate with our communities to bring people here. And so I think that's already been an action item, and I think that seamless integration you've heard about means they bring a reflection of who we are, and that helps us all achieve. I'll also note that when I thought strategically about expansion, what President Harroz commented on student enrollment and the changing demographic world is important across all of our campuses. And I felt that bringing in both Oklahoma and Texas helped build that level of interest across all of our campuses as we all compete for student population. And as we sit here in an athletic building and think about athletic things, I don't think it can be understated that the ability for us to position ourselves to be a national brand with a regional footprint that's easily accessible has meaning and is a platform for how we recruit students, how we recruit faculty, how we recruit people to our campuses.
Okay, let's go right side, third row, Ryan Aber of the Oklahoman.
Yeah, Joe Castiglione, I want to ask you, talking about the reasons that Joseph Harroz gave for the move, specifically the second one, the financial aspect of it, and keeping this athletic program one that doesn't need outside subsidy. How important was that? How challenging had it become, over the last few years, and especially as you look forward? And what is it about this move that makes that sustainable?
Well, if anybody's been paying attention, you know that the expenses in college athletics or around college athletics are going up much faster than the rate of new revenue. And we're challenged every day and have been. Go back to my first days here at Oklahoma. We have to find new ways to generate revenue. Going back to even, 98, the television revenue or the conference revenue sharing wasn't as big of a component of an athletic department budget back then as it has become. We weren't on television as much, so obviously the value wasn't quite like it is today with being on television, not just in football, but across many sports. Conferences didn't have their own networks. We didn't have as much activation and or integration of corporate sponsors. So while we had some, most of that was done on the local level. And some of that now has evolved on a bigger scale for strategic reasons, but we're still doing a lot on our campus. But when we were looking at the world going forward, it wasn't about where we were that day or where we might be 2 or 3 years from that point forward. It was where we were going to be in 25, when television contracts would change. Where were we going to be when people realized we're going to have to share some revenue with athletes? Where were we going to be then? And where were we going to be with more and more investment across a lot of other sports, be it facilities, be it investment in the program, handling rising costs? So Ryan, to your point, that's where we were trying to evaluate, not just what was happening right then, but how was the world going to change and where Oklahoma was going to be, whether it was going to be following along or play a role in taking the opportunity to lead our program. And that's where, go back to the great leadership here at the university. They're willing to step back and think and be bold about the future. And so we have a little bit of a difference than when we announced our membership in the SEC. We announced that we were going to go in 2025 because that was the original timeline. But as we've seen, so many other things took place in college athletics that forced all conferences to think a little differently. And one of the ways the Big 12 started thinking, it basically created an incentive to talk to us about an earlier departure, 1 year earlier. So we're here today instead of a year from now. And we're very, very excited about what that will mean for our program going forward, and understanding some way, shape, or form, those things we saw 8, 10 years ago are happening before our eyes. And they're complex. We still have to find the right way forward, and we will. But now we've created a stability, and at least a model for stability, by partnering with the SEC and being a member, and for what we can do to help make the SEC itself stronger.
Third row aisle, George Stoya, Sooner Scoop.
Yeah, I have a question for kind of all three of you guys. Could you guys take us back to when these conversations first started? Joe, when you talked to Chris Del Conte about this maybe happening and kind of the idea, what sparked it, where were you, when did it happen? Joe Harroz, when Joe C. calls you up and says, hey, what do you think about this? And Greg, that first initial call, and they said, hey, would you be open to this?
You wanting a glimpse of my book?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just jump in then. Not going to give you a glimpse of my book, but as I just mentioned, this whole thought process started probably 10 years ago, maybe even before that. You ask, well, why? Well, we just went through 3 different experiences around conference realignment within a period of 2 to 3 years. The summer of 2010, Nebraska-Colorado leave. The conference steps back, stabilizes itself, thought through whether expansion was the right way to go then. If so, what would it look like? And decided, we're good. We're good with 10 members. And we negotiated a television contract for the future of those 10 members. And then a year or so later, things change, and 2 of the members are leaving to go to the SEC, and now the Big 12 is faced with 8 remaining teams and what it was going to do, and had a lot of options on the table. And at the time, the decisions that were made related to adding 2 as opposed to any more than 2. So, all right, the conference is back at the number of original members, that had been constituted in that year and a half before. And the 2 members that were added were and have been great members of the Big 12. But things were continuing to evolve. And we just started paying attention to all of it. And then if you remember, the onset of other conference moves and the decision by the Big 12 to look at expanded membership, and us having a glimpse, behind the curtain of what that meant. And there was a decision not to do it. I think it was 2016. But it was that point going forward and reflecting back on the previous 4 to 5 years and what we had to go through thinking about conference realignment when it hit us. I mean, as everybody knows, there were other conversations that took place, in the summer of 2010 and even around, potential conference realignment in other ways in the future. So those were the first moments we started thinking about what was best for Oklahoma. And we didn't necessarily act upon anything other than to do our own deep dive about ourselves. And fast forward, there are conversations that we all know about that take place behind the scenes, not just around us. Other institutions were talking about what the future would hold for themselves. And it just became apparent we needed to be very strong in leading or creating a path for Oklahoma. And, learned that Texas was thinking the same thing and became intentional to consider doing something together if the situation would present itself. And so that's where conversations started.
President Harroz, or Commissioner, do you want to go?
Yeah, well, I was, a couple high-level things for me. October 2015, I shared, we presented analysis. I presented analysis to our presidents and chancellors about what might happen, because I think we always have to be mindful of what might happen. Even today, I don't have some plan. I've said clearly I'm not a recruiter, but we want to pay attention to what's happening around us, and we've done that for this adjustment. And so understand between October of 2015 and spring of 2021, when this conversation became real, I've had any number of points of outreach from different institutions, yet we've added Oklahoma and Texas, and that was focused on the spring of 21. It became real. We were coming out of COVID. You couldn't meet as presidents and chancellors in person. I thought that was important. We had a lot of change in our presidential roles. And so I think it was like June 2nd, 2021, we had a meeting in Birmingham, and I shared that we'd had outreach. I believed it was serious. It was united between the University of Oklahoma and the University of Texas. I very candidly said to our presidents, we can stop if that's your wish, or we can go forward. We've talked for years about movement around us. The conversations obviously continued through June. It wasn't daily or even weekly, but they were very, very, very focused. We had a video conference the morning of the story breaking in the Houston Chronicle. There were so many moving parts: the Supreme Court decision, college football playoff expansion, 2 commissioners had just come into jobs recently, and other conferences. And we actually talked about, I talked about slowing down the process. I then was going to have a call with our presidents that next Thursday to report this is real and they're poised to consider their future in the Big 12. The message from me was, we can't do anything until you decide your future in the Big 12, which attached itself to the grant of rights. That expired June 30, 2025. And when they informed the Big 12 of their direction, the next day they applied. And from that Tuesday until the next Thursday, 8 or 9 days, an incredibly intense time, as you can imagine, resulting in a unanimous vote, which I give all 14 members credit for achieving. The extension of an invitation that were invitations individually to the 2 institutions that were accepted on that Friday. But part of the clarity and I think the discomfort for the presidents was, I said, I can't promise you the vote that will result in an invitation. We had talked about it with our presidents and chancellors, but until you take that vote, you don't know. And there was a point of risk, and really from the point of the leak or the story in the Houston Chronicle until the decisions that were made, we didn't have any conversation. We knew who we were. I think I knew what Oklahoma and Texas desired. And people have asked, like, were you talking every day? We did not talk at all. My suspicions, I've never evaluated phone records, is there were a lot of other outreaches. But we're really proud of the way we handled ourselves and our decision making, and proud to be here, as I said, today.
President Harroz.
Yeah, don't play poker with Greg Sankey. Everything he said is correct. It was really hard to get a read, and we couldn't get any guarantees. Whenever I came into this role, I've been around for a long time, and I was there here at Oklahoma in a leadership role whenever we made the move to the Big 12. So, and all of those movements in the Big 12 that Joe spoke about, I had some understanding of. So as I came into this role, the very first meeting you go to, I wind up talking with Chris Del Conte, the athletic director at Texas, and Joe Castiglione. And in that conversation, we talk about, what's going to happen with college athletics, the general topic that takes place there, and what's our role. And can we continue to be Oklahoma and flourish and achieve our objectives? So the conversation started early. I think all schools have sort of broad general conversations. It wasn't going to work until you had the right alignment. And for Texas, that was their president in Jay Hartzell. He and I become very good friends. And he understood the need. We each did our individual analysis. And a big part of this, I grew up here. I'm from Oklahoma. And you don't make a move like this without thinking about not just your school, but what does it mean for the state? Could I look state leaders in the eyes if and when this broke and tell them this is a good thing for our state and not just the University of Oklahoma? Because if you can't deliver that, then you're not in a good position. And so as part of this analysis, I broke it down into the simplest 2 elements, those 2 questions. But underneath each one of those is a lot of thought. And one of those is this good for the state of Oklahoma? And when you look at it, right, the analysis is crystal clear. Those 14 schools bring over $100 billion in impact to their states, and they travel, and they get engaged, and it gives us a bigger stage. So the analysis only works, though, given where we were, if Oklahoma and Texas go together. And so having that alignment with the ADs, we got the ultimate odd couple with Joe Castiglione and Chris Del Conte. I would argue that Chris is much odder. But Jay Hartzell, the Texas president, has been essential as well, because you knew once this thing starts rolling that everyone's going to try and pick somebody else off, and there's going to be a lot of drama. You just know it's a reality. It's the same reality. I understand that when I come to sit down with these three, I'm the third most interesting person at this table. Right? I'm Sooner born and Sooner bred, and I know how it works, and I know how attractive athletics is. So we knew once it started rolling, people would try and pick off or divide or find reasons for it not to work. I think the reason this has worked and the reason we're here today is because it's the right people doing it for the right reasons. And it was important to us to do it in the right way. I think you see a lot of people in college athletics these days making decisions just for themselves and not thinking about the message that it sends. One of the conversations I was so proud of that took place during this process was, if we're going to leave, we're going to do it the right way. Right? And the right way for us to do this was to honor our commitment under the media rights agreement through 2025. Would have been a long time being in there in the conference, but it was the right thing to do that sends the right message. Because they had tried to extend those rights agreements before. We didn't extend. It couldn't have come as a surprise. So to us, a lot of the conversations had to come around, is it the right thing not just for each of the schools? Is it the right thing for the right reasons and beyond just your school? Is it good for Texas? Is it good for Oklahoma? And not just the universities of, but the states of. And then a number of conversations. And Greg is a terrifying person to try and, I tried everything I could to get him to commit the SEC would take us. And he wouldn't do it. Right? Indicated he'd take it, but he wasn't going to get in the way of something. And we had to be the ones that made the overture. So it was a long time in coming, but something I think was born the right way.
Thank you. Other aisle, third row, Dean Blevins, News 9.
Commissioner, good to see you again.
Yeah, Dean, good to see you.
My guess is you didn't make a whole lot of C's and D's in school.
Oh, don't overestimate my ability to fall to the bottom of the grade sheet.
However, are you smart enough to please most of your schools in the SEC about football scheduling, be it 8 or 9 or something as fair as it can be? Because there's a wide disparity at this time.
Well, actually not statistically compared to where we have been as a league. So in divisions, when we ran the analysis based on comparative win-loss record since our expansion, about a 15% variance between the most difficult schedule and the least difficult schedule. And those would vary by teams, but the divisions created that disparity. By going to a single division, which was part of the message in fairness and balance, that gap has narrowed. Now, you have to put a schedule out early enough where last year's standings weren't a part of the analysis for the 24 schedule, but at the time I think we had like a 5-point differential between the least difficult schedule, maybe 6 percentage points difficult schedule, and the winning percentage between the least difficult and the most difficult. So I think we've achieved the fairness, and then our programs wanted balance, which is part of the step away from division, so that we could rotate through in 4 years rather than 6 and 12. 6 to see a team on the other division at all, and 12 to see them in your stadium. So we've achieved that. Now, the discussion about 8 or 9 involves a great deal. It involves CFP access. That's grown to 12. I think we've wisely said, let's take a moment to see what happens this year and how the selection committee functions. Bowl eligibility, honoring some traditions that have been long established and others that are renewed. And that work is going to play out. Can I satisfy everyone? No, I've reconciled myself to that. I was once asked at a luncheon, how many schools in a conference is too many? And I thought about it for a second, and I said 2. like I can keep one school happy and one fan base happy, but once you get to two, there's always going to be a point of differentiation. So I think we've set principles, and we did that with all 16 universities involved starting in August of 21. We've honored those principles. We're going to have to make a decision about the 26th season over the next year or so. And that decision about 8 or 9 games and honoring some of those really very much focused traditional games is an important part of that conversation. But I think we've done an effective job balancing that. You'd love everybody to play against opponents that were 500. It's just not reality. When you guarantee a rivalry game every year, that creates a disparity, and then some of the descending decisions that come from that. For us, the first year, we made a decision, and we put this to our membership, that we're going to prioritize every one of our past 14 members playing either Oklahoma or Texas the first year. And so once you did that, then again, there's a domino effect on how the games play. But I think it's really, really important as a 16-team league, be a 16-team league, that we don't wait for a couple, 2 or 3 of our teams would not have seen Oklahoma and Texas wouldn't have seen 2 or 3 of our teams unless we had set that principle as a priority.
Okay, behind Dean, let's go to Cliff Brunn, Associated Press.
Yeah, this is for President Harroz and Joe Castiglione. You mentioned that this needing to be good for the state. There's a lot happening around here in the world of sports. New arena in the works for the Thunder, Olympics coming here in a few years, 2 sports. If you guys could dig a little deeper, how do you see this move to the SEC fitting into the bigger picture of all the things that are happening in the world of sports in this Oklahoma City Norman corridor?
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment. I mean, it's interesting. When you look at those cities that are prospering, and those states that are prospering, what happens around athletics is really important. And it's not just a harbinger, it's a component of what that success looks like. We know that the cities and towns and states that are winning are typically in the Sun Belt these days, and they create a live, work, play environment where you find highly educated people that employers want. And that live, work, play thing's important. You referenced in that Norman, Oklahoma City corridor. We know what MAPS has done for Oklahoma City. It's a national model, and it's transformed it. Right now, we've got a big vote coming up in the city council on whether or not they're going to approve the entertainment district in Norman, which is, as you described it perfectly, part of that corridor. The announcement of the components of the Olympics being here is incredibly exciting. The arena, look at that vote, 77%. Right? Are you kidding me? You don't need to work political campaigns to understand what that kind of vote is. Right? That is a loud declaration of who we are and what we care about. And so for me, when I look at where this city, this region, and this state is going, those are perfect indicators of the success we're seeing. There's a reason we're seeing double-digit growth in students, right? And if we can continue to build that kind of an environment where folks want to stay here and be here, it's a prosperous and virtuous cycle that feeds upon itself. So I'm hopeful that the city council passes the TIF district. I'm excited about what the Thunder are doing with the new arena that's going to be in place. And this move to the SEC, right? The ability to be a part of 12, other states that are out there in the biggest conference that exists, the light keeps getting brighter, right? And you've got to take the opportunity when it's there. And I think we're doing that as a city, Norman and Oklahoma City, and as a state. And I think we're going to continue to see more things like this occur.
Josie, anything to add to that?
No, I think that was very well said. Sports continues to be a unifier. It represents all aspects of our world, our society, regardless of perspective. The one thing people share is their passion for, love of a certain team. And when that happens, and of course we're going to see this on full display, it's something that creates a halo type effect, and it's a catalyst to other things that may be unrelated to sport, but certainly relates to the quality of people's lives. For us, I know we get into the foxholes, and we're going to say, what does it do for this sport, or how does it help this coach, or what does it do for this athlete? And all that's important, of course. But talking about the broad reach, like you said, and as President Harroz said, this is what sports can do. It's a powerful, powerful opportunity, and we're just trying to seize every element of it to help everybody else be successful.
Okay, let's go second row left, Jesse Crittenden, OU Insider.
Greg, kind of to that end, in terms of the college football landscape, you've mentioned it's changing a lot of things happening. When it comes to maybe traditions changing, rivalries changing, things like that, how intentional maybe do you have to be to get OU incorporated into the SEC, the tradition? How intentional do you have to be? How much do you think that happens naturally? And to that end, there's been a lot of talk in the past about the horns down gesture. Do you expect that to? Can you confirm whether or not that'll be a penalty moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about football penalties on July 1st. I'll let my football coordinator deal with that. I think we've used the word seamless. The creativity of our fan base on social media is on full display today, and I think that Oklahoma and Texas are being treated as our past 14 members, and you'll see both the warm and the cold embrace that can be present, and that is in many ways who we are. I think as I look back and think about A&M coming in 2012 with Johnny, boom, they're in the SEC. There wasn't any question. I can remember iconic moments. I can recall being at Missouri when they won the East, as the kick six was playing out on the TV in the press box. It happens, and it happens early because we have 16 members. We don't have 14 members plus 2. We have 16 members, and the University of Oklahoma will stand on its own and will compete successfully, and will create those moments soon, and those will become memories here and memories across our conference. I will note, just shifting, I have some staff here, so Taylor Brasher's our Director of Digital Media, Garth Glissman, our Associate Commissioner for Men's Basketball, Tiffany Daniels, our Associate Commissioner for Competition and Senior Woman Administrator, Herb Vincent, our Associate Commissioner for Communications. And I take this time, I was trying to figure out when to put it in, Mark Womack. Mark's been in the conference office since the late 70s, so he started at a time when the NCAA called every Monday in the fall to tell you what one football game would be on TV. We had no women's athletics competition, no men's basketball tournament. And he probably still carries a 10-team pennant logo money clip with him, at least he used to. And so I think he can vouch that, people are integrated quite quickly because the competitive environment and the interest and intensity makes that fact reality. I think I got everybody, didn't I?
Okay, we're a little bit past 3:30. These gentlemen have a tight schedule. We'll take one more question. Tom Green, third row, right side.
Greg, last time the SEC expanded, you were still, Associate Commissioner under Mike Slive. I guess, what did you learn from that process that you were maybe able to apply to this process, or to that 2015 meeting with, the SEC presidents when discussing the possibility of this in the future?
I'll also go back to something that made no notoriety, and that was the summer of 1996, the Southland Conference expansion, which I led when I was 31 years old and 2 months in, with Lamar in Southeastern Louisiana. And that is, from both, you had better be prepared, and you had better look broadly at the issues within your leadership room. I don't know if I'm any good at poker simply because I don't play, but you don't want to extend yourself to a point where you're making a level of representation that cannot be backed up with the decisions that are made. And I think it's probably as frustrating as it was for Joe Harroz in those conversations at the presidential level. I'll look people in the eye and say, I was honest, I was direct, I was clear. They had a responsibility with their Big 12 relationship. When they made that decision, then we could go forward with an invitation. And I told both presidents, I said, look, I don't need like the notebook of who you are. We know that. that's something that's happened in the past in expansion. We just need to know you want to be a part of it and are committed to it. And that produced a brief letter of application and then a lot of work to be done. And I think I saw the intensity of the work from the past expansion, because remember, that one fired up pretty quickly. You know, the Longhorn Network concluded yesterday, ironically, and that fired up pretty quickly with A&M after our media days. But you can never assume it was done. And I think there was a quick expectation, as I recall. Mark, you can verify, you know, there was a thought in like mid-July when it arose that we'd have some meetings and maybe by early August we'd have a direction, and that took another month. So don't assume anything. And then we were at 13, people don't recall, we were preparing 13 team schedules. We had 13 team schedules. We were looking to see what growth might be there for 14. And then that played out in November with Missouri. And I was asked yesterday, like, did you do these celebrations with Texas A&M and Missouri? We did, but they were very quick. We had 3 years of planning here. So one of the lessons here is if you want to have a big celebration, do 3 years of prep work. We did those on weekdays in the middle of the football season, one in September and one in November. And so all of these experiences have been different. But I think the preparation from your question, which is well asked in 2011, incredibly educational to watch. Being on the leadership line, we brought in 5 universities way off Broadway. Only 2 received invitations. All 5 thought they were getting into the Southland Conference, which informs an element of my approach too. And I think the fact we're here and the way we are, there's been some litigation around other points of movement in leagues. I think we, again, tried to be respectful and orderly, knowing the difficulty. But we're here, and I think it's proven to have been a wise approach.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes the press conference. Very